So the CEO is the most sought after, the most powerful title in a business, right? Because the CEO controls the moves, the biggest moves of the company, and that accounts for, according to research, 40 to 50% of a company performance. It's also a role that can be quite lonely, because that's the only role in an organization that doesn't have a peer. It can be lonely at the top, but here at LocWorld, we're never lonely, right? And we're very lucky to have 3 CEOs of the top industry players who agreed to come here and share their wisdom on how to grow a company, how to be successful, how to be different in the business. So welcome to Adolfo Hernandez from SDL, Smith Yewell from Welocalize, and Paul Danter from RWS Moravia. So we'll start with a little intro. You know them, so they're not going to tell you their bio, but I would like them to share a little bit what makes their company different, and how have they been, in their opinion, successful over the years. Paul, would you care to start?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Not only is it lonely and everything else you just said, but also not very diverse, apparently. I'm sure that will change. For Moravia, for RWS Moravia, we've been pretty dedicated to sticking to what we believe is the recipe that gives us success. And that really for us is about really working hand in hand with our clients and really trying to understand what it is that's going to drive value for them, and making sure that we can deliver something, a service, obviously in the arena where we have a speciality, but where we can then translate that into something that will drive value for their business. And of course, every business is a special snowflake and is unique, and so we need to work really closely with our clients in order for us to be able to do that. And drive that innovation for them in a way that really makes a meaningful difference to them. And we've been dogged in our ways of making sure that we organize ourselves and we structure ourselves in a way that allows us to do that. And we feel like that's what's made us unique. That's what's driven our success to date. And while we always look at how we can improve and how we can do things differently, it's really core to the focus that we have and making sure that we can drive our future growth in the business.
Thank you. And Smith, so you founded Welocalize in the late 90s, very different business than it is today. Would you share with us a little bit where you're at with your company?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for coming, everyone. We're going to do our best to try to entertain you, but in full disclosure, I was told before this started that there's another CEO panel tomorrow, and today is really just a warm-up for that. So if it's a little rusty, now you know why. And let's see, where have we gone in 22 years now since the start? I think we're actually at an inflection point in the industry. I've seen it a couple of times over that period, and I feel like we're in one now. So here's why. You've seen us acquiring into the digital marketing space. So we just acquired another digital marketing company in the spring. And how does that relate to where I see the inflection? I think that there's a convergence of content now across the different silos that have cropped up over the years, and that the two trends of digital transformation that's driving every business in the room in personalization at scale in order to compete are driving a view towards content, but not just from a localization perspective. And this is where it gets interesting. Of course, OTD rates, quality rates, those are important. But can we pivot in a digital context to what I would call performance linguistics? So in a digital marketing world, we have the data sets that are related to a digital asset, but they aren't being shared with the localization world. We have plenty of data sets on our side. That's my background. I grew up in the product loc world. But how do we build a bridge between product loc and product marketing? Because at the core of the content that they're both sharing is what? Of course, it's language. And the efficacy of that message and being able to measure it, I think, is the inflection point that we're starting to approach now. But that informs linguistic strategy, it informs your digital marketing strategy, your localization strategy, how those are connect, all your assets across the organization, your tech stack. That's why I think this is an inflection point, because all those touch points have to come together, and I think we're uniquely positioned to bring them together.
Super interesting. Adolfo, you've been in this business 3.5 years. You have a background in IT and telecom and quite a varied background. What you see makes SDL special?
Before I jump into that, I was a bit scared when you said, let me entertain you, because I thought you were going to get your guitar out. And for those of us who don't do any music, I think, oh no, Paul, you're not going to be so delighted. That was just, God, relax. It's on the stage, right? That's for tomorrow, by the way, right? You guys who are on this stage. In SDL, I think all of us believe, we know by talking to everybody in this audience, that everybody's undertaking big digital transformation projects. And at the core of the belief in SDL is that when you do these digital transformations and you do the connectivity and you look at customer experience and you look at the many facets, ultimately, to be able to deliver the right service to the right person in the right format will come down to serving the right content in the right format, in the right device, in the right language, in the right tone of voice. So digital transformation, as we see it today, is about being able to ensure that some of the world's largest companies, some of them are sitting here, get the right tools to create content, to know what they've created, to know where it sits, to know the version of it, to integrate it, to manage it, to translate it, to do some other modifications, and then to publish it. And it's that sort of global content. It's like an operating model, a content supply chain. And that's what we're trying to do. And we're trying to do that with services, with project management, with linguists, with a lot of software, both traditional software and tools, TMSs, language cloud, artificial intelligence, getting all of these solutions to sort of serve that global content operating model. So I think we're all trying to do the same, but probably from different angles.
Exactly, and that was actually what I was going to ask. So similar challenge that we're seeing along with the customers, content explosion, delivering the right content in the right format at the right time to the right audience. Can you tell us a little bit about how you think that you're doing differently, and maybe diving into a bit of the services where what you're banking on?
Well, why should a quality target be 98%? Or what makes an on-time delivery goal the right goal? Because in the case of quality, what's the effect on performance? So you've got a content asset, and how is it performing to a business outcome? And that's what I talk about in terms of our inflection point. How do we pivot from a cost center to a revenue generating partner? How do we pivot from a tactical delivery of languages to we have a language strategy as a company? We always wished this when I first got in the industry. The cool thing is that's actually now happening, which makes me very excited where we sit today in terms of our opportunities. So being able to, with performance linguistics in data and tying it to content outcomes, those are the challenges that we're tackling.
Yeah, that's probably the hardest question that anyone in business has to be able to answer, in particular as a CEO. I've always believed that as a CEO, you will live or die by getting 3 or 4 things right or wrong. And probably the number one question is, what is the problem to be solved? What problem do our customers have that they would willingly engage someone and pay money to solve? If you get that one right, I think you're okay. Then you have to execute and have the team and all that. If you get it wrong, then either you're solving the wrong problem or something that people don't value, something that people don't want to pay for. Either of the 3 scenarios are not pretty if you're the CEO. in our case, we decided that the problem to be solved is helping some of the world's largest creators and consumers of content deal with that global content explosion. That's where we're at. In our case, it's less about the performance in itself. It's about dealing with scale, with volume, creating faster, repurposing faster, finding, reusing, translating, publishing, and doing that at scale very quickly, in real time, and generating the data sets and the knowledge over the next few years that will help these enterprises to generate better content. That's the journey for us, and I hope we got it right, for my sake, otherwise I won't be sitting here again.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to repeat what you just said, Adolfo. I think you hit the nail on the head for a lot of those things, but I think to link it back to maybe the keynote speech from this morning, it feels to me like this is about also the business model in which we operate. So, you know, as companies that have been around for 20 plus years and longer in some instances, we're kind of operating in an environment that's very familiar to everybody in this room. And for us to be able to do the things that Adolfo just mentioned, I think that there is some innovation that's required around the ways in which we engage with our customers so that we fit into the workflows that are involved in the content creation, the content publishing, the measurement of the success of that content, and the fast iteration of that content that allow us to be more aligned with what our clients are trying to do. So I think from our perspective, we're always also looking at how the commercials of this industry need to evolve over time for us to align better with what needs to be done for our clients to be successful.
And, you know, you've talked about the classic triangle, right, of time, quality, money, and really what's the, you know, how do you take content and get it out there faster from creation all the way to publishing and with all the steps along there. A lot of discussions in the last few years have been about technology. Technology is the solution to it all. We've had the whole hype about NMT, and I'm curious to see, what do you believe really is the transformative technology that helps achieve some of these goals? Do you believe NMT it is, or, you know, it's a much broader palette?
I'll tackle it first. I think I would not sit on this stage and commit to one single technology. I think this is all about really taking what is available in the market, and our position on this is that we're not really the innovators of some of the most cutting-edge advanced technology that's going to be created in the market. We sort of play around in that area of implementation as opposed to development, and I think that's really critical. And so for us, it's about looking at what's available and then sitting back and thinking, how can this actually benefit our processes? How can this benefit our customers? How can this speed up the time it takes to do something, or the quality by which it could be produced? And for us, we're kind of the curator of that technology for our customers, we believe. And what we try to do is then look at the situation that where we're trying to deliver something, and then we think about all the tools that are available and the best way to kind of assemble those into some form of unique stack that services something. And I think that's the right pragmatic approach, really. We are going through, you know, a very fast rate of change at the moment. It's quite hard keeping up with all of those things. But we try to do that, and we try to do that on behalf of our clients. And then, again, what we try to do is then best advise them on how to harness that in a way that's going to be effective.
Do I think NMT is going to be the most transformative technology over the next few years in our industry? My opinion is no. And here's why I think that. I think the most transformative thing is going to be machine learning across the entire NLP landscape, of which machine translation is one subset. It is a machine learning technology that has its place, but there's the opportunity to be much more transformative in applying the data to how our programs can start to learn. For example, in smart resourcing. can we assign, a project manager can't remember who did the great job on that project. If they're processing hundreds of tasks a day, can the system know that? Can the system know, smart load balancing, that at a certain point, for example, a queue of tasks, does that particular resource then become less productive? And can it load balance according to that knowledge? Risk management, smart risk management where the system with the data is understanding when should the red lights go off in the project in advance of when it's too late. So I think the machine learning capability of which, again, MT is one segment, but across the whole NLP landscape, how language at the core of content and all the associated tasks are becoming more efficient, more intelligent. Data literacy then becomes top of the forefront for us and for our teams. That's where I see the industry going.
Yeah, I don't think you can choose one. I think there is so much optimization and transformation to be achieved that you have to, there's no single silver bullet. It's just a lot of lead bullets. You've got to have the best translation productivity environment that you can possibly ideate, integrate it as well as you can with your translation management and your workflows and your predictive analytics. That's absolutely critical. And then if you can get a lot of leverage from translation memories, NMT and all of that, that's fundamental. But to me, we're sort of catching up with other IT and services industries who've been doing some of this stuff in the past. I don't think that's going to be transformational. It's evolutionary, it's accelerating, it's going to generate a lot of value, but it's not really that transformational. If I go back to my problem to be solved, which is this global content, I'm actually more excited about something that is going to come and hit us over the next couple of years. We started to talk about it as a semantic AI, right? Because translation is something that you would do once you've got the content. But a lot of the content needs to be understood, summarized, reformatted, recreated on the fly. And I think everything that has to do with semantic AI, of which machine translation would be one of the attributes, that could be revolutionary. You'll work on smaller content and you'll have these things understanding what you're trying to say, and you'll be able to recreate it at different volumes, different extensions, different formats, different tone of voice, different languages. I think that's moving this industry forward a whole decade in one jump. And I think that we will see that over the next couple of years.
We'll do a little pause, and we have Ulrich monitoring questions. So, Ulrich, tell us anything that's come up that you think.
Hold on a second.
Get his mic up. Mic.
Hello?
Mic.
Hello. Oh, I'm online. Hey. So one question has to do with merger and acquisition activity. One audience member was wondering why there is not more going on in the Middle East and North American territory. Why one rarely hears about M&A in that area.
And African
So from my perspective, it feels like from an M&A activity point of view, there is a lot of activity happening right now. It's quite frothy, the market. Everyone's very excited. Specifically around geographies, I think that there's nothing special in terms of those geographies in regards to what people are doing today. I think that it's just it's just natural course of business that's happening there. I will say that from my point of view, I don't see any difference today from what has happened over the last 10 or 20 years in this business, which is that, this is a very long tail business with lots of smaller companies, and they'll continue to be acquired. The focus of that acquisition will typically be driven by what our customers are demanding. So If it's from a language sourcing point of view, it will be in areas and territories where we're seeing growth and demand, and various other areas based on what they offer for us. But all in all, I think that it's just natural course of business from my perspective in terms of acquisitions.
I'm going to state the obvious, but the fact that there is no more going on is because I guess most of us haven't found anything that we think we can acquire successfully. Acquiring is relatively easy, right? It's like promoting an employee. That's very easy. It is harder to ensure that when you promote the employee is going to be successful in 2 years' time. And we all face that task as a leader. M&A is the same. It's not easy, but it's relatively easy to borrow some money and turn it into an acquisition opportunity and acquire something. The test is how much value do you generate in a year or 2 years' time. And whether it's because, I guess, we haven't found the right verticals or the right capabilities or the right software or the right motivations, things happen when we have found them. And I think the three of us have done in the last 18 months transactions. I do find the topic of M&A in this industry since I arrived kind of strange. Everybody talks about M&A. More than any other industry, it's like a real topic, it's like teenager sex, everybody talks about it. Every meeting that you go to, everybody wants to talk about M&A, and you're like, okay, yeah, but let's talk about something else. So M&A should be something that happens here as it happens in other industries, as and when each of us and everybody in the audience finds a good opportunity. But I don't know whether you guys find it amazing. It's the only question. Is that and Brexit what everybody asks me about?
Well, we have a for sale sign-up list at the back of the room, so if you're from the Middle East or Africa, don't be shy. We're happy to have conversations wherever the fit might be. It could be regional, it could be specialty, it could be any of the above. Why haven't deals happened much in that area? Probably because of scale. There's the scale of the providers.
So we've talked about the problems that you're trying to solve for your customers. We've talked about global content journey, and we've talked about M&A, but let's dig a little bit more. So, of course, it's part of the toolkit. You look at your business, what your customers need, and you figure out, what you could slot in that's going to help you progress your business forward. How much time do you spend on that part of the business, on the M&A side? Can you tell us a little bit more? And that's about time management as well, right?
Right. I couldn't say no. You're both looking at me as in like, you're next. Right. Well, I think there's some times where, when you're just doing a deal or you just done a deal, you spend a lot of time on that. I know in 2018, I spent a lot of my time around the Donnelly language acquisition. First, securing the acquisition, then preparing the acquisition, then integrating the acquisition, visiting customers all over the world. So there was probably over a period of 6 to 9 months, it was easily 70% of my time fully devoted to that. There are other times where you don't. So the question is, you've got to sort of select the timing, what's in your calendar as such. Are you in customer time? Are you in M&A time? And I don't think you should have a quota for M&A. I always say to my team, we need to have a quota for growth, right? And sometimes that growth will be organic, sometimes will be inorganic, and you've got to just make sure that the time we spend thinking about growth is the right amount of time, more than just having we've got people in the teams who all they do is M&A and partnerships, and I think that's better use of their time.
And Smith, maybe, would you share with us, I remember in London earlier this year, you talked about the successes and the ones that were not as successful as you would have hoped. Would you tell us a little bit, because you've been super active on the mergers and acquisition, you say, for sale sign at the back of the room. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, as I mentioned in London, unfortunately M&A is kind of like marriage, for more than half fails. So the challenge is trying to make sure that that partnership, when it begins, is one that's going to stand the test of time. And what challenges have we had? We've acquired 18 companies. One of them didn't work out. And why didn't it work out? Making sure that all of that extra work is done at the beginning around the fit. We're people, we're a service business, and how well that's understood when you decide to make that kind of union and all the effort that has to go into getting those difficult questions out on the table. If you don't do that work, it's difficult to make it work after that. Where it's worked for us, people ask, for the other 17, why were they successful? What was the secret? Shared values. Period. Begin and end with that. 40% of our leadership team across the company now came from acquisitions. So having a vision, having the opportunity to grow and expand your career, the culture, the strength of the culture, spending the bulk of your time on that to make sure that the M&A is going to work is what I've learned.
So from our point of view, Moravia had done no acquisitions. It was all pure organic growth until we were acquired by RWS. And to use your marriage analogy, I feel like we're like Hugh Grant in About a Boy, which is we divide our day up into unique blocks of time, and we really focus on them, and we're in control of them, and we haven't got to worry about anybody else. And that was really successful for us. And yet, of course, I think we were missing a trick in what can happen when you can bring in some companies that have good synergies with the business and do all the things that Smith and Adolfo have talked about. I'll say it is about ramping up and ramping down from a timing point of view, but I think the other thing that's worth mentioning is on the other end of things as well, which is something that happens in our industry and happens with us on the stage today, which is when we potentially get acquired or there is a transaction that happens, and that is also something that takes up a huge amount of time when those things occur. And it's something that we had to manage when Moravia was acquired by RWS, and it's a really difficult task when you're leading a company, because you need to still focus on what is really, really important, which is delivering. And yet there's something that's going on that's going to impact the investors in that business dramatically, and there's a lot of focus on that, and you have to deliver on that as well. So being able to do both those things can actually be quite a challenge, and I think we've probably all been through that in our careers, and it's something to be thoughtful of as you move on.
And as you say, we're in a service business, in a people business, whatever company we're talking about, it's about talent, it's about culture. And I'm curious to dive in, we've talked a bit about your strategy, how you look at the business, how it's evolving, where you're putting your bets. Tell us a little bit about, the aspect around talent retention, some of the things you're doing that's helping your business.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're next on the next one, right? Deal. Talent is critical, but it's not critical because we are strong in business. Talent is critical because talent is critical, right? When you're in the software business, it's equally important. When you're anything that has to do with intellectual capital, intellectual property, talent it's great. And I think most of us know how hard it is to find the right talent, right? I don't know anyone who just can source the talent as quickly as they can. So getting the right talent, training them, retaining them, is probably one of the most important tasks that we have to do as CEOs, right? And sometimes it's quite hard because the day-to-day sort of pulls you into other urgent situations, but actually spending time with the talent inside, outside, I think is really critical. So in my case, I spent the first sort of couple of years understanding the team that we had, understanding the culture that we had, bringing in some new people and some particular opportunities. Then we did the integration of Donnelly. They came with a fabulous team, great culture as well. So we decided to sort of move tack and sort of launch a new program called Life at SDL, where we're looking at the whole sort of 5 pillars of what life at SDL has to be. We're looking at career planning, skills, we're looking at culture, behaviors. We started with something that I'm glad is behind me. We did a sort of a open pulse survey of all of the employees, the old and the new, which is always a bit like, oops, you know, asking all of these questions that you don't know what you're going to get. But we decided we wanted to get a sort of level, said, okay, let's just know where we are, and then we're going to work from there. We've got a lot of pressures. You know, we operate in 39 countries, so we needed to understand how people in different cultures felt inside the company. You know, 54% of our company is female, so we wanted to understand as well what people felt about diversity. So we level set. We level set everything, and then we build that Life at SDL program targeting the improvement opportunities that came out of that. It's probably now the whole topic of people and life at SDL personally commands about a third of my time right now, because I don't have the ability to amplify the business, but I have the ability to amplify the team, and they've got the ability to amplify the business. So it's just really exciting and a really important thing. Plus, a lot of them are millennials, right? So younger people, they put a lot of more value in these type of things. So it's, I find that way harder than dealing with spreadsheets, I tell you.
Smith, what's your take on that? And maybe, yeah, let's dive in a little bit also in the diversity at Welocalize and how you are handling that as an organization.
Sure. So I was at the bar last night having a drink with one of our senior leaders who is female. And she said, Smith, you need to know that our talent is getting called weekly by headhunters trying to poach them. Are you aware of that? And I said, of course I'm aware of it. Well, what are we going to do about it? And so I asked her, well, if that's the case, why are they still here? And her answer was our culture. So it really begins and ends there for me. As long as we are continuing to invest in that fabric, it's the binding glue, it's the friends and family, culture, diaspora, people have left the company, come back to the company, clients, it's that whole range of relationships that we have that are bound together by, in our case as a company, what we call our guiding principles, and also what we call our 4 pillars. And those just aren't words on the wall, they are embedded in our culture. How we invest in that practically, it's simple things. For example, an exchange program we have where we send people around to offices. How we invest in diversity in terms of recruiting diversity across the company. And we even look at that at our executive team level and at all levels in the company. And not just conventional diversity metrics, but across the spectrum. So that's an active discussion, an active part of our culture as well.
I talked to a really trusted friend when I took this role on and said, what's the one thing that's going to shock me when I do this job? And he said, you think you're going to get involved in all the really cool stuff in the business, the technology, the new service development. He said, but you're actually going to spend 85% of your time doing HR and culture. And it's kind of true. But I see this role as kind of the chief. I'm a big believer in the idea of CEO as Chief Culture Officer. I think it's a hugely important part of what we do. Culture is everything in our business also. It is the glue that binds everybody together. And we do spend a lot of time on it. We spent a lot of time in the last 12 months launching programs where we've chosen specific areas, whether they be the green agenda, where we have people who care about how we could be changing our working practices to help with environmental efforts, all the way through to supporting our LGBTQ colleagues. And it's those things that really give people something other than the day job they come there to do as a reason to turn up every day and work hard and enjoy the environment that they're in. And so we spend a lot of time and effort on those things. It's really important to us. Interestingly, it's also really difficult to manage when you're doing that across cultures, which is something that we all have to think about every day. So how we apply that in Nanjing versus how we apply it in Tokyo versus how we apply it in Rosario can be very, very different. But it's important for all those teams, so we kind of push that down a little bit as well, and we take a lot of advice from the people who work for us, and we want to hear from them in terms of what can we be doing, what would resonate locally, and I think that's really important to have that level of engagement and to give everybody a voice. It's worked really well for us. I think there is a uniqueness to being a Moravian, and we hope that people feel that when they come work for us, or whether they just come visit the office. Again, it is a very critical aspect, and it's something that I'm really passionate about, and we're going to continue to develop.
So if I came to Moravia, you're a young graduate applying for a position, and you ask, what's the Moravian culture? How would you describe it?
So the first thing we do is we take them out, we buy them a huge beer and get them a pork knuckle, because we're still uniquely Czech. And I think it's about this ability of empowerment, and that's what they should feel. So just because you're a graduate and because this may be your first job out of school does not mean that you're not bringing a unique perspective and something that we can leverage in the business. And so what they should feel when they come in is this ability to be heard and to not have to work their way through the system to get to a place where they feel like they can make an influence. You should be able to make an influence from day one, and that's something that we really try to develop in people.
And let me dive a little bit further now. Talking about culture, I think it's very important also, as you mentioned, different countries, different ways of doing business, different ways of behavior. When you're saying that the Moravian culture is about empowerment, if I'm an employee in Sweden, if I'm an employee in Japan, I might feel that differently. So any tips or things that you've done to kind of adapt that and apply it in different countries that you can share with us?
One of the things that I did the year before last was actually, and this is a lot of the stuff we're talking about today actually, is the devil is in the detail. You kind of have to deep dive into some of this a little bit, whether it's about M&A and finding a fit, about kind of like unpeeling a company and really understanding whether or not it would work or whatever. It's the same with this, so that it's the kind of devil's in the details. So the one thing that really helped us the most 2 years ago when I first started was I immediately asked for a cleanup of the tooling that we used to communicate. There were 9 tools for everything. So people were trying to communicate with each other, and it's like, am I using Jabber? Am I using Slack? Am I using Teams? Am I using Skype? Am I using email? I could go on. And it just created this sort of sense of chaos and disconnectedness. And I think in our industry specifically, and it's true to the world today, we work in a global environment, and that sense of connectedness needs to be managed really well. And so we really focused on how do we pare down our tooling and then make sure that everybody knows how to connect. And the other thing is we make people turn their webcams on, which sounds so basic, but that FaceTime and that eye-to-eye contact with people when you're working with colleagues around the globe, and I apologize to colleagues in the room who have seen me at 6:30 a.m. Pacific time. It is what it is. We're all human beings, and we just, we need to work, and you need to make that connection, and human connection is incredibly important in the development of culture.
Smith, any thoughts to share also about the culture at Welocalize, how you would describe it? And same thing, I think it's very interesting to understand, how do you manage it? Are you an American company? Are you a global company? Can you tell us a bit more?
We are an American company, and we're trying to compete with pork knuckles, but I'm not sure.
It's hard, man.
I'm not sure hamburger and French fries stack up to it, but I think the strength of a culture has to hinge on knowing what is its true north. So, where do you go when you're lost? And that has to happen reflexively, hopefully across the entire company. And for our company, the true north is trust. That's what I'm trying to build our brand around. That's what I want to stand for, whether it be our partners, vendors, clients, staff, whatever that might be. And when times are dark or you're feeling lost, that true north is there. That is the North Star. You can see it. You're going to go towards it. So that's really what I spend a lot of time, just making sure that that never wavers.
Adolfo?
Yeah, I think for those of you who know SDL probably know that it was traditionally very, I like to say UK-centric, but I think that would be an overstatement. I think it was very Maidenhead-centric. Those of you who know Maidenhead, you know what I'm talking about. Sort of kind of the world was ruled from Maidenhead, and the world came to Maidenhead. So I think one of the first things I've had to do is actually spend as little time as possible in Maidenhead, and making sure that people realize that it's actually all of us are SDL, and the decisions are made everywhere, and their executives sit everywhere around the world, and everyone is traveling, and everybody gets to see the CEO, and there are town halls happening anywhere around the world. Because I think it was a really important message to bring. Then we've also had to build, I think, as Paul says, I think the sense of connectedness was missing. So we had to build a lot of the joint culture, the sense of destination, the true north, some of the narratives, sharing what's happening in the company. We were joking earlier. I mean, I thought it would be helpful if I started blogging to my employees for the first month every Friday. 3.5 years later, I have not been able to give up the habit, and I hate it, but it has sort of become part of the narrative. People know what's happening. When one of you complains to me, trust me, every one of my employees gets to hear about it on a Friday. Because I think it's important that they get to know what's happening. So we sort of do, I mean, there's not like magic, it's just a collection of very little things. What I do say when I talk to people who are just joining the company or are thinking about joining the company, I like to be honest. I say to them, sometimes you have to choose between joining a software company or a services company. You don't have to choose that. In SDL, you get both. You know, local company or global company, you get both. Content or language, you get to do both, right? And everybody's really excited, right? And I think I've hit all the messages. And then I said, but you're also joining a company where the priorities will be changed, where the pace will be impossible, where you have competing priorities and demands hitting you every day, where you're going to be expected to use a lot of software. Whatever you do, software is going to be a key component. You're going to have to work globally. We don't make people switch on the camera yet. But people have to always work and deal with Skype and Yammer and all of these things. But I think that's actually a strong selling point. Because if you fast forward 5 or 10 years, that's the future of the workplace. In any industry. Those days where everything was well defined, I think are unfortunately over. So I said to people, you come, you're going to learn about a lot of different things. It's going to be manic, but it's going to be a great, great learning about what the future is going to bring. And it's fun.
It's fun. So we've talked about your strategy, what you're doing for your customers, that's your first stakeholders. Talk about your employees, your talent. Let's talk about the other stakeholders, your boards. You know, so let's talk a little bit about how do you manage the board? What value do they bring to you? You know, and what are some of the lessons learned over the past years, maybe with some of the best boards you've worked with? Returning the compliment.
So manage a board.
That's part of your duties, right? As a CEO, that's one of the big components.
Well, we have the benefit of having a very simple board, and I've not ever been in a complex board. So I can only speak from my experience. We're on our third private equity investor since we started the company, and our board's never been anything beyond myself and the investor. Of course, we have other people coming to board meetings, but that simple structure is how we run the business. I think a bigger question is whether it's a board or a strategic advisor or even a mentor for you in your career. You know, that's what I look for from our investors and why we've been so successful with 3 in a row. Where are they mentoring me? So I guess that's the simple answer is, what am I learning? When we brought in our first investor so many years ago, we didn't need the money. We didn't bring the investor in for the money. Candidly, we brought the investor in because I was nervous that I didn't know what I didn't know. And so that principle and that relationship with the investors and the board has held ever since. But I think it applies to everybody in the room. Where are you getting your advice? Who can you count on? Who's mentoring you?
I love my board. They're awesome. They do hold me accountable, and they do make sure that I'm doing the right things for the business. And it's important. Everybody answers to somebody, right? Eventually, our board answers to their investors. Our investors answer to their shareholders, and so it continues. And so, yeah, I would agree with Smith in that the best boards I've ever been part of are ones where there is this diversity of experience, which adds a huge amount of value for me as I'm trying to make decisions and grow the business. And that experience may need to change depending on what your current goals are. So, you know, if it's to scale the business rapidly, then you may need one kind of individual. And for me, boards have always worked when we've brought in a lot of outside kind of board advisor type people who are also trying to keep one eye on those things and bring that alternative perspective. But I very much agree with Smith in that it's about what it gives you and how it helps you run things more effectively. And I would definitely encourage anybody in this audience to take that advice around mentorship or coaching, because I think that's having somebody you can talk to and break things down with who's maybe not as close to the problem as you are is incredibly beneficial just for your career in general.
Yeah, I think in my case, my board is a bit more complicated. Not difficult, but complicated. It's a public listed company, so there's a number of regulations, numbers, committees. Everything gets documented, written, then we've got external advisors. So there is an additional paraphernalia that comes with that. So you gotta just do it, right? There's just no two ways about it. But once you sort of forget about that element, which is sort of part of the job description, and you focus on how do you get value out of the board, I think it's transparency. It's finding the right way to communicate enough transparently so that they can give you the best possible advice. You know, most of the board members come and spend a day in the business a month. You spend 100 hours a week, so you couldn't share possibly everything, right? So you've got to be transparent of, this is what's on my head. This is what I think is working. This is what I think I need help with. And then sort of get them to give you their views. One of the things that I do with them, just in case anybody finds it easy, is before every board meeting, I write a CEO update. I actually make a point of writing it down. And it makes it sound like I love writing. I actually hate writing. But writing focuses your mind. It forces you to really distill. And I always tell them, this is what's in my head about the business. This is what's in my head about customers. This is what's in my head about investors. This is what's in my head on M&A. This is what's happening with talent. And this is what's happening with innovation. It's always the same. It's never more than 3 pages. And I always send it to them a week before. These guys are very experienced, right? So they're C-suite guys of some very successful companies. So they got a chance to sort of think this through. And then when we get to the board meetings, they probe around that. That's actually quite fun, and it's very useful. It's way more useful than the other paraphernalia of the public company boards. But it's actually okay. A lot of people say, well, you know, it must be a pain. I don't think it is a pain. You know, private equity boards also have their complications. So I think it's just part of the job.
we're talking about advice, that you're talking about mentorship. Let's get a little bit close and personal here. So can you share with us what's the best, I will qualify, business advice you've ever got, not investing in Bitcoin or who to marry, but can you tell us, what is the one thing that somebody may have recommended to you and that stuck with you and was a great piece of advice?
It's Paul's turn, isn't it?
I was staring at Smith, but...
All right, okay.
Well, something that stuck with me many years now. So before Welocalize, I was in the Army, and I was in the first Gulf War. And the best advice I ever got was from my commander at the time, and the way he described it to me, he said, Smith, if I see everything happening around you with flawless precision, and you're sitting off to the side in your Jeep, then you are successful. And that's stuck with me ever since, because that, I think, is one of the hallmarks of great leadership. You have mentored, you've given opportunity, you've built a team, and they are strong enough to make it happen without your direct involvement all the time. Guidance never goes away, but that has stuck with me ever since.
Great. Paul?
Okay, so I think, actually I'm going to not answer that question. I'm going to answer a different question, which is, what is the worst piece of advice I was ever given?
That works too.
So the worst piece of advice I was ever given was when I was 16 years old, and it was business advice. I remember I grew up in Wales, and at the time it was pretty depressed, I would say. Anybody who's ever seen the movie Billy Elliot, that's pretty much my childhood. I didn't dance, but I will with enough drinks. It was quite depressed, high unemployment levels and all those kinds of things. And I remember going into the career offices. We got to have one meeting with them. And he said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to go to college. I want to get out of here. And he said, well, the thing is, if you go to college, there's 3 years' salary at the local factory you wouldn't have earned. And I said, really? And I ended the meeting quite abruptly. And I thought about it afterwards, and it stayed with me for my whole life, which is, you can find yourself in situations where really everyone is telling you you shouldn't really be doing that thing, and you should stay in your box, and this is the way things have always been, and this is what you're going to need to do in the future, and just follow this path and do what everyone else does. And actually, I've never been successful doing those things. I think you've always got to say, how do we break free from this? How do I do something different? How do I not follow the rules? And that's where, true innovation and true, actually kind of exciting lives come from. So I'm really glad I didn't follow that. I'm glad I didn't work for Ford. Sorry if Ford's in the house, but...
Right, how do you beat that? You just simply don't, right? Do you know, I don't believe there is such a thing as the best piece of advice. I think advice is contextual. So there is times we've all been given a lot of really good advice, right? But some advice resonates more in certain stages of your life than others. I don't know if you guys have had that experience. And then some things really stay with you. Sometimes you just put them in the back of your mind, you don't think about them for 20 years, and then somehow, miraculously, they sort of come out, right? So I remember, early in my career, in the 90s, I had the opportunity to meet Lou Gerstner when I was at IBM, and one of these development things that big companies used to do in those days. In Armonk, and he said, the single best thing you can do when you're at this stage of your career is prepare. Yeah, what about prepare? And I thought for a decade, being really well prepared served you really, really well. Then you grow up, and then you become more director opportunities. Then somebody says, what the best thing you can do is you build a good team, right? And then you get to what you refer to as the lonely top, right? Where everything you do matters. And probably the most recent great piece of advice that I got is never leave your principles on the bedside table when you come to work. You got to be the same person. You got to have the same beliefs, the same motivation, be the same person, stand for the same things at home and at work. Otherwise, you will burn out and you will be ineffective as a leader. If somebody told me that in my 20s, I would have thought, come on, get a life, man. But at this stage, it's probably more relevant.
Ulrich?
Yeah, well, we have quite a few questions. How much time do you have left?
15 minutes?
15 minutes, all right. Well, let's take one from early on. From Renato, can't make out the last name.
One of the newcomers at the conference.
It's one of the newbies, yes, I'm sure. What are the new titles that people have at your company that weren't there 3 or 5 years ago?
Not the Chief Happiness Officer, right?
Pass.
We used to call it vendor management at Welocalize, and now that is talent management. So everybody in that group now has a brand new title related to the word talent and not vendor, and I think that was a really good idea. So that's an example.
We started using, I think it's something that's fairly common in these parts. We started using the idea of engagement in titles, so like engagement managers, because really that's what we're doing with our customers, is we're engaging with them, we're not kind of project managing them, we're engaging with them. That became a thing. That's the one that comes to mind.
And no Chief Happiness Officer.
No,
You're the Chief Happiness Officer of the company, right?
We have not innovated on the job titles just yet. I think we got a pretty boring set of titles, I'm afraid, just being honest.
All right, well, here is one of my favorite ones, seeing that I get to choose. What are some of the things that you're doing as CEO to help elevate the localization industry and the way localization is perceived within companies on the buy side?
But I'll tell you some of my... Can we? Yeah. The first thing, when you go and go to other sort of CEO meetings and think about it, is, for example, the City of London, there is a lot of gatherings, always CEO panel for this and that, or CEO dinner. The first thing I have to do, I actually have to explain what industry we're in. I mean, seriously, I kid you not. I'm talking to the CEO of some of my largest customers who do several £1 million with us a year. And the CEO doesn't know, A, who we are, and B, what industry we play in. So you just really, like in your 2 minutes, explain, actually, you know your group, when they do this and they do that. All right, well, that's really important. Yes, it is, right? So a lot of what I do outside this industry is sort of explain what that is. I have to admit, I only got to this industry a few years ago, and I used to run a big software portfolio in multiple companies, and I was spending in R&D north of $1 billion. I never had to talk about localization. To this day, I don't know how we were localizing our products. And I think that's something that we have to overcome as an industry. Not necessarily just the localization, it's the whole content issue. But fortunately, I think content is getting more attention now, and by getting more attention, localization is able to piggyback on it. But I think we still have, as an industry, a lot of work to do. We need more people. We got CSAs, and we got NIMSI, and we got some specialized analysts that are helping. But we also need the big guys who sort of help across every other domain in IT services, the Gartners of this world, people like that, to sort of help us amplify. And I don't think we're going to do that one company at a time. I think we need to sort of raise our profile.
Well, my mom still asks me, what is it exactly that your company does? We are still on that uphill trek. I was in a QBR earlier this week that I joined for one of our customers, and before it started, we went off to another room and we spent 30 minutes just blue sky strategizing. And that's where I'm seeing ideas come out. And there's many of you in this room, you know that we sit down and we brainstorm, and the idea is how are you going to take that back inside of your companies? There's no magic bullet, there's no magic way to do it other than just getting in a room and let's talk about some ideas and then how can we move those forward.
I feel I have to share my story as well. I have two kids, I have twins, and I was at a park a couple of years ago, and my kid started playing with another kid, and the woman said to me, "What is it you do?" And I said, "It's localization." And she said, "Oh, I do that for Cisco." And she's like, "Great, finally somebody knows what I do." So then we became friends, and I think that's kind of the way it is. I think when we sit down and we look at how we promote who we are as a business every year, we make our marketing plan and we think about that. I mean, it's challenging enough for us to think about how we convey the value we bring to our clients or prospective clients. Trying to do that as an industry, I think, is kind of beyond my remit. I think it's something that we need to work on. I agree with a lot of the sentiment. Adolfo, that you just mentioned, and there's more we should be doing. I think it's great that we have this forum, but it's almost like we all need to just go divide and conquer, so everybody kind of understands what it is. But I feel like there's a lot more we could be doing, and that's beyond just our kind of general marketing plan to get ourselves out in front of the market in general.
All right, something a little related. How do you see the buyer-LSP relationship evolving in the digital transformation? Okay. I think that is TBD. So I think that to answer one of the previous questions, which was how does maybe your client see you? So from a localization point of view, and what you do. As this digital transformation is happening, what we try to do and what we've been moving towards as an organization is actually having more business-related conversations with our clients rather than localization conversations with our clients. Meaning, what is it you're actually trying to achieve? And then can we lend some of our expertise to get you there? And maybe not. Maybe what we do is not the right fit for what you're trying to achieve as a business. But you have to actually have that kind of conversation. And I think that has been a big challenge for this industry. I think that a lot of this industry grew up through translation and translators, and they became part of LSPs, and the conversation was always about sort of, okay, so how do we get this to that? But actually having the business conversation of what's going to really make an impact, what's going to make you successful in your business is the way that you get there. So I don't know that there's a magic recipe for how you address that, but having those conversations is the way that you get there.
Well, I'll throw out some what you might think are crazy ideas. The fuzzy match pricing model is more overhead and administration, and thus harming rather than benefiting the program. So I'll throw that out there. That's a different relationship you engage with the customer. Paying a translator per word is more harm than good in many instances, not all, because there's no incentive. And so lack of incentive is a problem. Relationship from a strategy perspective, where we see our relationships changing with customers is actually having conversations now. Can we create together a joint multilingual strategy for our company that in some instances we can jointly present? So we never had those kind of opportunities in the past. And we're seeing more and more of those now. And this is what I'm describing when I'm talking about an inflection point that is being driven by this need to change the relationship from a tactical deliver the project to a true strategic driver for the business.
I think there's going to be probably two evolutions in that relationship. The first one is related to the engagement, as you said, I think the engagement is going to evolve more to, can I help you with your clinical labeling problem? Can I help you file those multinational, multi-jurisdiction IPO documentation faster? Can I help you with your brand consistency and tone of voice challenges? Sort of elevating the engagement at the solution level. The second thing we're going to see, I think, is something that we already saw in other industries, right? I was talking to someone last night, and I said, you know, in the 80s, if you wanted to send a letter to someone, you would have to put a stamp on and send it. Then in the 90s, along came email, and somebody thought that the first few emails should be free. And since then, email has been free. But you never thought about this. Email is free, it's instant. Letters used to take a week, and you had to pay for them. That was a business model change. And now we're going to subscriptions, right? You used to pick up the call, and then you have a cost to make the call. Then every time you connected with your WAP service, you would have to pay by kilobyte. Now you get bundles and you get subscriptions. So I think we're going to see some of that finding its way into our industry, where you'll get some of the stuff, you'll open the tap, the water will come out, and you've got that, and it's going to happen, it's going to be unmetered. And there are going to be additional solution-related services that people like us will be putting on the table. So we will end up making the money in a different way, and we will end up engaging with you guys in a different way. And I think that's going to make everybody's life so much easier than counting words and counting fuzzy matches and leverage of memories and God knows what, and then trying to use Stratos counts and all of these useful things we do nowadays.
Can I add one thing? And I think, because I absolutely agree with that, but it's a two-way street as well. So I think the models will change, and they need to change in order to adapt to this new world that we live in. But also, people on the buy side, our clients, need to think about what they need to do on their side in order for that to happen as well. So if you think about the revolution that happened in marketing over the last 20 years, and how content is tracked and things can be adapted and improved over time, if that kind of model was to apply to localization, then there's a bidirectional flow of information that has to happen in order for that to take place. And we're not there yet, right? And so we can't influence all that change. We can certainly experiment with new models, but some of it will also require change on the side of the buyer as well.
And you have many of them in the room, so let's have a domino effect with the change, right? Any other questions?
Well, lots of them.
Any friendly ones?
Let's not so much.
Any logos?
Here's maybe one that we could probably talk for quite a while about, but maybe you all could come up with one or two answers. Any thoughts on the types of skills and abilities you see employees needing 5 to 10 years down the road? You may have already said this, Adolfo. I think it's about being able to keep up with a rapid pace of change. So it's not a skill per se, but it's a desire and a willingness to continue to seek out and adapt and learn new things. And if you can do those things, you're going to do really well in whatever career, whatever industry you're in, because that's just the nature of the world we live in.
For us, it's data literacy. That's top of mind. Having the data, first step, once you have it, how can you articulate business insights from looking at it? I thought that was going to be a lot easier across our company when we started moving in that direction, but I was wrong. It's very difficult to teach, train, understand the concept, all the way down to a project manager. Pushing files is not adding value. Explaining to the customer the insight from the data is the value.
I would agree with what they said. I would also add the ability to unlearn what they learned in the past 5 years. I think it's really important. People forget what they were doing, how they were doing it, and they throw themselves into the next challenge. with an open mind and willingness to do things very, very different. You know, as looking at data instead of looking at workflow is a significantly different business mind. And people are going to have to do that, right? And you used to be inward facing, now you're going to be outward facing. You used to do it that way in the good old days, but that's gone. The unlearning is going to be critical.
All right. Well, you know, when we were preparing with our panelists here, we thought an hour and 15 minutes is going to be very tough to fill that. And I think there's another 3,200 questions coming, but we come to a close. So I would like to thank you all for spending your time, sharing your thoughts, and being with us today. Smith?